Hey friends, in this video I'm really looking forward to talking to you about why Canon's market segmentation as it currently exists doesn't seem to make much sense anymore. Let me tell you a little bit of a story with this. So my partner, I got her a T5 a while back, as kind of like I want you to get into photography too because I'm super into it, and she was wanting to get into it a little bit, and that just seemed about the right amount for her in terms of everything that went into it in order to get the most that she would want out of it. So what that meant was that we just went for it, and she has a T5. But the T5 falls into a bigger spectrum, and so, I know it goes lower and higher than this, but I want to kind of talk you through where that segmentation was and where it is now. So then there was the T5, the T5S, the T6, the T6S, and then the 70-80D. And then, 6D and 5D Mark IV, 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV, whatever. So say you want a camera. You can either go with, the super duper base model like the SL1, or you can go with something like the T5. So let's start there, coming up. But the T5, say that sounds good, but you want a little bit more. Say you want the flippy screen, you want some autofocus in video, you go to the T5. But say that's really important to you, that video, autofocus in video, all that, that's really important. So you're gonna instead jump to the T6S because that is probably the best value for money camera that Canon was making at the time. So that T6S, then what's the difference between that and 70-80D? Not very much. The 80D, of course, has actual dual pixel autofocus, so that makes that stand out. But it kind of leads up. And if you just want stills, then you have the T5, the T6, and then your 70-80D. And that 70 or 80D looks like a very, very capable all-purpose camera. They kind of start segmenting further down. So let's take the opposite example. Say you're already in photography. Say you have a T3i or whatever, and you're like, okay, I really want to spend some more money on this. I really want to get into it. I have a couple lenses, blah, 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 blah. So you say, well, maybe I want a 6D. You look at the 6D and you're like, well, that costs a little bit too much. And then you look at the 70-80D and you're like, well, that costs a little bit too much, and I don't know about it. So then you walk into your T6, T6S. And so you say, do I value video or stills more? And so your T6S is your video, your T6 is your stills. And what if you're saying, well, I just want, a generational or multi-generational performance boost. I don't really need to be spending a huge amount of money. Then you have your T5S, which is capable for video, assuming that was something that was important to you on your T3. Or if you're more stills oriented, you have your T5. Going up and coming down, this market segmentation works, right? Especially within the Rebel lineup, if you will. But then with the 6D Mark II, with the full frame, you have your 1DX, your 5D, and your 6D. So say what's really important to you is full frame. Well, I don't want to spend $6,000. Well, I don't want to spend $3,200. I can afford to spend $2,000. Okay, I'll get the 6D. But with the 6D Mark II, they've not really given it enough to make it on par with the 5D Mark IV in terms of features. They haven't made it a budget 5D option, and the original 6D was in many ways better than the 5Ds of its time in terms of autofocus, point performance, like so you could take it down to -3 EV on that center point and that was better performance on that AF point than on the 5Ds until the 5D Mark IV. 6D 2 has that 45-point array, so that's great. It's a really useful array. All those autofocus modes are fantastic, but it isn't better than in any way the 5D Mark IV. Dynamic range was better on the original 6D than the 5D of the era. That's no longer the case. The ISO performance on the original 6D was better than the 5D of the area. That's no longer the case. So say you want full frame. Say you want full frame video. Well, the 1080p on your 5D4 is fantastic, and that's the first one that also includes 4K. But that 4K is going to cost you a huge amount of money. Say you don't want to do that. But then you step down to the 6D Mark II, and you don't have a real, like a functionally decent video codec on your 6D Mark II. So you're going to have to jump back up to the 5D Mark IV. But say you want a flippy screen, you have to jump back down to the 6D Mark II. It doesn't make sense. Like, what you're losing too much on the way down, and you're not gaining enough on the way up within the full frame lineup that Canon has to really motivate you to either go up or come down. You have to be an existing like T3i user and say, I really want full frame. I have all EF, not EFS glass. So, 6D Mark II makes perfect sense for me. Or, oh, I have an original 7D. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and I just need an update, an upgrade. So 6D Mark II, because it's more affordable. There's a lot of things where it's like, this device is capturing a captive market, or rather it's capturing the captive market's attention because of the price point, not because of the features. And for the discerning users of Canon systems, they're going to say, well, this isn't making any sense. And that market segmentation that Canon's been really, really effective about building out and in the process kind of hurting a lot of their brand equity, they haven't been doing it very well of late, because the 80D came out and then the EOS M5, and that's the same sensor. They made the ISO performance better on the EOS M5, but the dynamic range worse, and than the 80D. And then they expanded that same sensor to include the 77D and the T7i and the EOS M6, all with about the same performance, but with higher native ISO on the latter three, on the T7i, 77D, and the EOS M6. So you're keeping that same sensor now across 5 devices. So what really differentiates them? I mean, it's the form factor between the 80D and the EOS M5, or the T7i, 77D, and the EOS M6. But what's the real difference in terms of like the body size of the 77D T7i? There isn't really one. The 80D is a much larger body. It's a little bit more weather sealed, but it's the same sensor, it's the same image quality, it's the same autofocus performance across all 5 of those, and more importantly right here, across those 3. So you're basically only gaining a headphone jack and losing, up to the 80D, or you're gaining like super beginner functionality in your T7i. So it's like, there isn't enough actual segmentation for their segmentation strategy to work, because they're not doing it the right way. And what I mean by that is, like, when you look at the competition, right? Fuji with the X-T2 and X-T20 is really cool about this, because they gave you oversampled 4K on the X-T2, and on the X-T20 it's just 4K. So the X-T2's 4K is fantastic. The X-T20's 4K is going to be good in 1080. When you transition back to Sony, there's the A7 II, which gives you 1080, gives you S-Log, gives you peaking and zebras, all that stuff. And then say you want more resolution, you go to the A7R II. Say you want more video, you go to the A7S II. Like, that segmentation makes sense, because you have to kind of tweak those individual sensors for those particular tasks. And the A7 II is more of a dual general purpose camera, and so they're going to push you towards the A7S II for video, because that sensor is tweaked specifically for video. Do I think they should have put 4K and S-Log 3 on the A7 II? Yes. Will they probably do that on the A7 III? Yes. So part of that is segmentation. Part of it is, we can't fit everything we want to for the price into this body, right? But your A7 II still has clean HDMI out if you want to capture 4K or 1080 at greater bit depth. It still has a headphone jack if you're going to do video recording on it. So it's giving you all of the features around what you need, except for the 4K, which is pretty good. But Canon isn't doing that. They're not giving you C-Log on your crappy 1080. They're not giving you, a more useful file size 4K in the 5D. They're not giving you C-Log on the 1DX. So that segmentation doesn't bear out effectively, because like the 26 megapixel sensor in the 6D Mark II has better ISO performance but worse dynamic range, and that ISO performance is on par with the 5D Mark IV when it should be better because there's fewer pixels in that same amount of space. So by all accounts it should be better unless they're going to artificially handicap it. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Dynamic range should be better on the 5D Mark IV, but the dynamic range on the 5D Mark IV is still on par with a Nikon D3400 from like 2011. So that doesn't make much sense either. You know, there's a lot in there that isn't understandable, and I want to start a conversation on how that all works with y'all, because y'all are discerning. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.